On today's podcast, we sit down with Paul Koehler, co-founder of Tandem Management and drummer for the acclaimed rock band Silverstein. With over 25 years in the music industry, Paul shares rare insight on what it's really like to manage the artistic and business sides of a highly successful band while also guiding other acts such as The Devil Wears Prada and Saosin. We dive into the secrets of longevity in today's ever-changing music landscape, the sacrifices required to balance passion and pressure, and the evolving relationship between artists and record labels. Plus, Paul reveals the biggest challenges holding artists back, the innovations he's most excited about for the future, and his personal recommendations for aspiring managers and musicians. Insiders, this is an episode you can't afford to miss. Insiders, are you ready? Welcome to MUBUTV's Music Business Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage artists and music business professionals who are dedicated to having a successful career in the new music industry. Here are your hosts, Rich Ezra and Eric Knight.
Welcome back, Insiders, to another episode of the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage your music career. On today's episode, we're excited to welcome Paul Koehler, co-founder of Tandem Management and drummer for the iconic band Silverstein. Paul wears multiple hats, navigating the fine line between artist and architect, juggling the passions of creativity with the relentless pressures of the music business. In this fascinating conversation, we dive deep into Paul's 25-year journey from the early days of burning CDs and riding the emo boom to reinventing himself as a manager for bands like The Devil Wears Prada and Saosin. We discuss the evolving role of artists in their own careers, how to find longevity in an ever-changing industry, what really holds artists back from breakthrough success, and why taking risks and learning from them is essential. Paul also shares his unique perspective on the future of the music business, the impact of technological disruption, and the rise of artist empowerment in the age of AI. Plus, he reveals the qualities he looks for when signing new talent and leaves us with invaluable advice for the next generation of artists and managers looking to build a lasting career. You won't want to miss this one. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Hey Insiders, ready to crush it in the music world? Whether you're an artist, band, or future music biz pro, MUBUTV's personalized coaching is your secret weapon.
We'll work with you side by side, sharpening your songs, building your brand story, locking in your ideal audience, and powering up your social media game.
Starting fresh or ready for the next level, we cover everything. Live shows, marketing hacks, branding, all tailored just for you.
Flexible coaching packages let you decide what fits your time and budget. Single sessions or discounted bundles that make investing easy.
Imagine the boost after just one session. Clearer goals, smarter strategies, and unstoppable confidence. Get started with a free 15-minute discovery call at book.mubutv.com. That's book.mubutv.com. Let's make your music career unstoppable. Hey Insiders, are you ready to take serious control of your music career? Whether you're dreaming of getting signed, finding the perfect artist manager, or landing your music in movies and TV shows, MUBUTV has you covered with 3 essential free guides.
First, learn how to contact A&R the right way. The insider secrets to approaching executives without burning bridges and with confidence.
Next, discover how to attract the right artist manager, when to start looking, what to expect, and how to find someone who truly believes in your vision.
And finally, unlock the world of sync licensing with how to pitch to music supervisors the right way. Get your music placed in film and TV, reach new audiences, and open up exciting revenue streams.
These guides are packed with real-world advice, practical steps, and the do's and don'ts every artist needs.
If you're listening on this podcast or watching on YouTube, just check the description below to download your free copies now. This is your blueprint for turning dreams into reality. Don't miss out.
Hi, this is Nick Groff, artist manager at Rare Society, and you're listening to the MUBUTV Music Industry Insider Podcast.
Welcome back, Insiders. Today's featured guest is Paul Koehler, co-founder of Tandem Management and drummer of the iconic band Silverstein. This was a very unique conversation, Eric, for a couple reasons. Number one, he's a very successful manager of not only Silverstein, but of a lot of other bands that we talk about. one of the things that makes this conversation very unique is that he's also the drummer.
Right.
And that's a very unusual
Rare.
and
I can relate to that situation because I've done that.
Know, yeah, you've done that. And so you can actually speak on that subject from being on the front lines of that. Really enjoyed the conversation. One of the things that stood out to me was when he talks about the kinds of artists. And this, I'm listening to this as a person who is a manager and a musician. But he said he really likes to work the most. He finds, the most valuable artists to manage, he says, are the ones who are self-motivated, hardworking, and willing to collaborate. He said this motivation is infectious, even for managers.
Yeah.
So when he talks about that, I mean, that's a very important quality because it goes to the characteristic of often the kinds of things that are very valuable but aren't spoken.
And the non-creative qualities that we always talk about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's just always assumed.
And it just makes it easier when you are working with somebody that's as motivated as you, because like we've said before, we can't want this more than they do. And I know that firsthand. And, again, I related to this so closely because I've done this for years with the projects that I've worked with and including myself too, managing, my own career. And so it was something I really admire what he has done and the success he's had. One of the other areas that I really loved, and this is something we've talked about a lot in the show, but about networking early and often, and about how he stresses the importance of building and maintaining relationships from early on in your career. Today's peers could be tomorrow's industry leaders and partners. And I mean, you and I have both talked about this. A lot of the interns that I've worked with through our management company that I've had through the years have gone on to become major players in Spotify and just people that I've networked with. And I'm sure, Rich, you've got a million of them since you know everybody that have gone from early on learning who they were to now having massive success, which is always something that is really nice to see when you see somebody that you kind of saw at the beginning of their career and now where they're at today. Absolutely. And you're getting to a very important point that I think is very valuable for people to hear, is that it's beyond, the networking element is beyond just who you know. It's building relationships. The relationships, yep. And relationships in this business are everything. And with that, insiders, sit back, relax, and enjoy our featured conversation with Paul Koehler. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you so much for joining us. You are in the rare and unique position of living, I guess, as both the artist and the architect of your band's journey. And it puts you in an extraordinary, but I think brutal position, one where, art and business, passion and pressure constantly collide. And I'm curious, was there ever a moment where you felt torn between those two roles? And what did you have to sacrifice to keep both of them alive?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think, people kind of ask, how you kind of compartmentalize that. But I think whenever you take on more of a business role, you kind of sacrifice being the artist. So now everything's your problem. Everything it is tailored to the group, not to yourself. So the ability to kind of have sort of wants and needs as the artist, you kind of put that aside and you kind of have to step up a little bit. But for me, it's I felt like it was a natural progression. I've always been really motivated and always wanted to work really hard. And I think being part of the artistic creative side, I just wanted to push that. So I wanted to learn how to augment that, to be more successful, to try new things, to trend with the technologies. And it's just always kind of been a fun journey to have that alongside of this. And you get to reap the benefits.
Paul, it's exciting to have you on the show. You and I share the same thing where we both manage the projects we've been in. And so it's fascinating to speak with you. I wanted to ask you, in reflecting on the 25 years of touring and recording, what are the most important lessons about longevity that hit you the hardest? Something that you could only discover by living it, not imagining it when you first began.
Yeah, I think there's kind of two things that I've experienced, and that's particular to my 25-year journey, starting in the year 2000, which was, I think, a real tipping point for technology and the internet and stuff like that. So I think, understanding that technology is always going to change, And it still will. People today are probably like, okay, we figured it out. It's like, no, it's going to probably change again.
Right.
Things are always going to get disrupted. But I think, writing, the ways of like, we started off burning CDs and then pressing CDs, and then there was MP3s, and then there was illegal downloading and piracy, and then there was like a vinyl resurgence, and then streaming became like, there's all this stuff that's happened in 25 years that all happened when I was, while I've been having a career. So I think always understanding that there's going to be technological trends that will shift the way that you do business, the way that you reach your fans, the way that you conduct your day to day. But I think also understanding that trends come and go, and you're going to have to ride the highs and the lows. But what's also interesting is that something may trend, whether, for my particular band, I think we were playing the right music at the right time. This whole quote emo boom of like the early 2000s just happened to happen when we were starting. So we were one of the bands that got signed in that wave of artists, and we rode to the top of that wave. But then obviously, it kind of goes out of fashion, or people find some other things, or, whatever, the trends pivot for a bit. So you got to ride the lull. But what's interesting is that the stuff will come back around, and you kind of see that 5 to 7, 10 years kind of ups and downs, especially in like the rock subgenres, I specifically, and even just overall. So understanding those and having to like ride the waves, the high and the low, and adapting your business and your band to that. And if you stay true to yourself as an artist, this is where the artist side comes into it. If you stay true to that, you're more likely to come out the other end doing pretty well.
Yeah, I would think managing Silverstein while also managing other prominent bands like The Devil Wears Prada, it must require a very unique skill set. And I'm just curious, have you ever had to choose between your own band and a client? And if so, how did you make that call without burning bridges on either side?
Fortunately, I've not experienced that. I think the benefit of working on a lot of different projects is just the exposure to ideas and learning from each other and trying different things, and understanding also that like something may fit for one artist, whether it be an opportunity or just a strategy, but maybe not fit for the other. But really, like how I even just like view like a day to day for me, it's like, if you're cooking a meal and you have a bunch of pots and pans, or like something's being prepped over here, you kind of can like start one dish, and then like that's usually me like coming up with some ideas or responding to something. Now I'm waiting on someone else to like do the next step. So I'm going to move on to the other thing. And it's cool because you kind of like, you get to like work on a bunch of stuff. And while you're waiting on one thing, you get something else back. And meanwhile, that might spark an idea that you get to then come back to that other thing or whatever. So that's another thing too that I find really fun for me. Is just the being involved in more than one project has been really rewarding.
Yeah. And speaking of projects, with over 20 active management clients at Tandem, what specific qualities, both creative and non-creative, do you look for in the artists you choose to work with? And how has that criteria evolved for you over the years?
Yeah, I think, it's different also for every manager. So Tandem was started about almost 9 years ago with my partner, Rich Fernandez. And currently I hold 4 clients that I take care of: Silverstein, The Devil Wears Prada, Saosin, and Avoid. And Rich takes on a lot. He has a lot of artists, and we have some other managers below us. So I'm not directly involved with everything, but I do, help share the vision and guide the company, which again, we want that to trickle down to all the artists. And we want to have a good pool of artists, but also good diversity, because not every artist has the same goal. And I think what's important is to recognize what those goals are, and also recognize what both the artists can get out of us and we can get out of them, both from experience and success and just like creating something special. I think there's a variety of artists, some like, working on their first record deal, some of them working on their second record, some of them working on their 10th record. There's a variety of stuff. But I think what that does is kind of helps us kind of segment everything to be at a different stage and to bring experience from all those levels back to each other. But, I've said this to a lot of people too. It's like, as a manager, you can only work as hard as the artist does. And when they work really hard, that is very infectious. So it's really cool and not every artist can work 24 hours a day. It's like, and some artists need to have breaks. Some artists need to just go away and write. Some artists are just in full autopilot touring mode. So, but like for us, like we have to kind of be responsive to that and be also willing to spring into action when the times are right. When they're like, okay, guys, like we want to do X, Y, and Z, and like we want to map out the next 12 months. We were ready, or we just turned in the record. Like one of the most exciting things is like when any of the artists, whether it's one that I'm actively working with or my partner Rich or somebody, and it's like, okay, we just got the new song or the new record, and we're like, all right, now it's like it's game on. And sometimes you have to wait for that too. But yeah, I think it's being open-minded to everyone's vision and understanding that everyone's vision is going to be different.
I would think in your position that balancing creativity with the relentless demands of the business is probably one of your toughest challenges as a manager and as an artist. And I'm just curious on a personal level, how do you preserve your creative energy, your spark, while also, making the commitment for managing bands as well and handling the work of your clients? What does it cost you personally to maintain that balance?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't. I don't know what it costs, but I know that. I mean, that is a struggle, right? Because there's mundane tasks to take care of. There's day-to-day activities. There's just connecting the dots on certain things that take up time and energy. But the best part, the part that I love, is the creative energy. So, like, yeah, you just gave me your record. I'm gonna look for the angle, or I'm gonna look for like the marketing idea or something, or I'm gonna find what I think is a single and find a reason to champion that. To build a plan out. You want to create something extraordinary or special on the visual side. Let's go out there and figure out that together. That takes a lot of energy, and sometimes you have to kind of shut off the noise. Like you kind of have to like airplane mode your entire life and say like, okay, for the next 2 hours, all I'm thinking about is the creative side of this. And that's what I've learned. You have to kind of make time for that. Otherwise, you'll just be responding to the autonomous stuff, just like the everyday things, and you won't be able to inject that creativity. Because to me, it's like if I'm not injecting the creativity, like I that's what I live for. So yeah, it's a time energy balance for sure on all of that.
Yeah, I would think it is, and I would think you can. You just sort of touched on it, that you can easily fall into letting that balance get out of whack on one side or the other, where one of the other elements, suffers as a result of that.
Totally.
Let me ask you, Paul, is the value of a record label in today's world the same for all artists?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think, record labels today, I think it's a debated term. Everyone requires a label for different reasons. So yeah, I think it's not a one size fits all situation. We're not all necessarily competing for the same radio airplay and the same end cap at the record store anymore, because there are many successful artists that don't want to be in the radio and never will be on the radio and may never even sell a physical record. And that's okay, because they're finding different ways to build a business creatively or with different types of integrity. But I do see the value in a label for the partnership as well as the creativity. It's like if you go and self-release, for example, you're effectively signing up to be a record label. And as an artist, you might not have all those skills. And you might really know your art and you might really know your fans. But sometimes even connecting those two things can be difficult. But again, for some artists, they don't need to sell hundreds of thousands of records. They might need to sell 2,000, and that's enough for them to sustain their art and to, I guess, reach the level that they want. So I think, artists that are really trying to, reach something much greater than themselves, a label, the right one, chosen correctly and worked correctly, can sometimes be that catalyst to get them there.
Hey, insiders, we hope that you've been enjoying our featured conversation. Stay tuned because we've got so much value coming your way. But before we dive back in, a word from our sponsor. Hey there, insiders. Are you dreaming of making it big as a musician, artist, or industry pro? Well, at MUBUTV, we offer personalized coaching to help you turn that dream into reality.
Think of us as your personal guides, helping you polish your songs, craft your story, find your fans, and grow your social media like a pro.
No matter where you are in your journey, we've got the tools and strategies to take you higher. From live gigs to branding and marketing, our coaching is all about you.
Choose what fits your budget, from single sessions to value-packed bundles.
Start with a free 15-minute discovery call today at book.mubutv.com. Your music career is waiting. Remember why you started making music? That feeling of passion, hope, and longing, wanting someone to hear your story?
But chasing success can be confusing. Who do you reach out to? When? How do you avoid mistakes that could close doors?
At MUBUTV, we believe every artist deserves a clear path forward. That's why we've created 3 free guides that cover the essential skills every musician needs.
How to contact A&R executives with confidence. How to attract an artist manager who gets you. How to pitch your music for film and television placements.
These aren't just tips. They're blueprints designed for artists who want more than just dreams. They want results.
If you're listening right now on this podcast or watching on YouTube, look in the description below. Download these free guides that will change how you approach your music career forever.
Don't wait. Your future fans are waiting.
Hi, this is Jordan Glickson, Vice President of Music and Talent at Vivo. Are you an insider? I am. Subscribe now.
Yeah, definitely. And do you also feel that there's a distinction between artists at a certain station of their career than at the beginning? In other words, like, is somebody who's maybe a veteran, 10, 12, 20 years into this, is a label the same value to them based on their career than it would be to a brand new artist?
No, I think that's a good question. I think that also depends on the artist. If you're a veteran or a legacy artist or however it's classified, there's the often trend to be like, okay, I've kind of figured this out. I have a built-in audience. Putting up my own records is going to be the solution for me, and it works for a lot of people. Some artists are in that position and say, I'm not done growing this thing. I feel I haven't reached my peak. I need to get there, and a label is maybe the key to that, or worth trying. Or as you see a lot of artists, as they get deeper in their career, they're switching labels and bouncing around to kind of find that partner, which is probably because, they feel like there's more juice left to squeeze at that stage of their career. So, it's a good question, like at different stages of your career, where does the label fit in? And I think that is, again, on a case-by-case basis for the type of artist and their goals.
Yeah, precisely. I totally agree with you, especially today. Paul, I'm curious, in reflecting on your own career, both as a musician and as a manager, was there ever like a single risk or a single element that you took, a risk that you took or a commitment that you made that changed everything for you, either professionally or personally? And if so, what did it teach you?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I feel like I've been taking a lot of risks. I think I think stepping up, managing my own band at a time where I think there's actually less artists doing that. It's become more and more popular, I think, especially since the pandemic. But that really kind of puts you out there to be like, you don't have necessarily the reputation or the relationships that a company may have, but I'm going to go out there and get them. And what's been awesome and super rewarding is the amount of respect that's been able to be earned over the time of doing that. I think, there's just been a lot of challenges. Even on the Silverstein side, deciding to, dive into re-recording our records, and this was in 2018, before it became really, mainstream and more popular. That was a big risk that really kind of paid dividends, both in reigniting fans on old material, challenging the record label who was saying, no, we can't do that, but I was saying, yes, we could. And also telling our new partner that this is going to help bridge us to the next stage. And it was really that was a big risk, I think, too. I think that's a really specific example, but was trying to find a way to be like, okay, we're approaching 20 years in the near future. We have a back catalog. We need to modernize things. We need to find a new home for that. But also we want to keep putting out the best new music possible. How can we have both at the same time? That was a risk, but really, really benefited us. So yeah, I think there's just been a bunch of, every day you kind of put yourself out there for an idea, for a tour, for a release strategy. And, I think the most important thing though is if you are taking risks, just to learn from them, whether they turn out good or bad, and trying to pull that stuff back into your next decision.
Paul, you've been on the front lines as both a musician and a manager for your entire career. And I'm curious, what do you feel holds artists back from success in their music careers?
I think for an artist, self-indulgence, not looking for feedback, trying to do too much on your own can really hold back your creativity. Obviously there are some very prolific artists / producers / writers that can do almost everything on their own. But I think some artists get in their own head of like, I don't want to pay a producer. I'm just going to do it all myself, or I want to make the record I want to make. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like if that is the artist's vision, they're like, I'm not going to do the same thing I've done. I want to do this for me. That's great. But if you're trying to really measure it against success and trying to grow, which again, I think growth is always the thing I come back to. And like, if an artist is like, I want to grow, it's like, okay, well, valuable outside opinions, help, support from all stages, from the label, the publisher, the manager, the agent, your closest friends. What I call the peer review, like send your song to like your friends that you spend more time on the road with, that you tour with, that you play with, that you open up for. That gives you valuable feedback. But there's a lot of artists that kind of grow out of that. I think as a new artist, you're always like asking everyone their opinion, right? You're trying to get validated because you like, I made this on my own, or I made this, in the small confines of maybe a small band and a producer or whatever. But I want to see, can this be something? You're always after that feedback. But as artists typically grow, they shelter themselves from that. And I think that's where like the real form of A&R, I think, is so valuable if you can tap into it as an artist. But I think, everything's become so fast, so, just consumable, that maybe sometimes even labels aren't even catering towards the artist with that real A&R hand to really build up the song repertoire and really making sure that, you're firing on all cylinders, that you have the path, you have the strategy, you have the vision for what you're trying to create next.
Yeah, it's very interesting. We are in such a, what I like to call a transitional time in the music industry. We've got so many things, and we've been here before. The early 2000s, and was a transitional time going from the copy model to the access model, and I think we're in one of those periods now. And I'm curious for you, Paul, looking ahead, what trends or innovations in the music business excite you the most as a musician and as a manager?
Yeah, I think, there's obviously kind of shifting towards more of an empowerment of artists direct to their fans. So you hear a lot of stuff about data artists and data collection and just kind of streamlining all those models and communities, whether it be Discords or mailing lists or, private, kind of hangouts or streams or VIP and all that stuff, and just finding a way for the artist to really be connected with the fan and to be able to reach them directly. I think that is even a big case of like, where does a label fit into that? If you're able to market it on your own to reach that audience, I think that's very exciting. I have a different trend forecast, and I might be a bit, out there to kind of suggest, but I think with the rise of AI, which is obviously a big contested, topic right now, I think people are going to use it for different things. But what I'm kind of imagining is, and there seems to be a lot of rejection of that, and actually forecast that like real authentic, like ripped jeans, like rock and roll music is going to have a really huge moment because people want authenticity. And I'm excited to see like who that next Nirvana is going to be, because I think that's the trend that's going to rise. I think, as there's been certain genres and trends and sounds and stuff that either have been glamified or just exploited too much. And I think going back to like, people just want real music performed by real humans as almost a rejection to that. I think we're going to see a big trend of that. But I think we're also going to see a big adoption of like how AI is like making a lot of decisions. And there will be labels too, right? That I think are going to be literally using AI systems to decide who to sign. And then there's also going to be a rejection of that. There's going to be labels being like, screw that. I'm going to go back to the clubs and I'm going to find the artist and I'm going to sign them. So I think we're going to have this really interesting polar opposite. But I think the organic stuff's going to have a really cool moment in rejection of all this stuff. And I'll be interested to see how that goes.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how that trend shifts. Throughout your life, Paul, have there been any books, films, or documentaries that you have found to be particularly interesting or particularly inspirational that you can share with the audience?
I try to watch like any music documentary possible. Like there's like a great one on Clive Davis that I saw years ago. I think it was on Netflix.
Yeah, that was a great one.
Yeah, just again, like you're talking about like the art of A&R, which I think it's just lost in a lot of ways, like, and the ability for someone just to understand the power of song. I think that one was cool. Yeah, I mean, the Shangri-La documentary with Rick Rubin. That's
one of the ones that Rich would we rave about that.
We
on the
always
show.
rave about that one. That's a great one. Yeah, absolutely great one. I use that in my classes a lot.
Oh, spectacular! Yeah, it's like also just to see, like the other side of making records and working with artists. Yeah, I think like there's some that like there's definitely plenty that I see. Like literally, if there's anything, there's just on an artist, on a musical trend, whatever. There was that one on Apple, what they called 1971 or something.
You're one of the very few people to ever mention that one. I thought that was an absolutely extraordinary, brilliant documentary series, and I've never heard anyone until this moment mention it but you. I thought that was just brilliant.
I don't know how that one flew under the radar. And I think we were making a record at the time and I was like raving about it. I was like, everyone's going to watch this, which is so interesting because like I was born after that time. And so I didn't live any of that obviously, but like was interesting was like how much shift was happening and just like all the prolific stuff. And yeah, it was a really cool documentary to kind of like focus on an era in time and just identify how much important stuff was about to happen or was happening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Definitely. Paul, you've built a very successful career for yourself, both as a musician and as a manager. For the next generation of artists and managers, what advice can you offer, not just for building success, but for real career longevity and impact?
Well, one thing I always joke about is like, I think everybody you meet, I think all the hustlers right now, I think all like the 18-year-old kids or whatever trying to like be a manager or to be an artist or whatever, they're all going to grow up one day and they're probably all going to be running this thing. So cultivate those friendships and those alliances when you're young. Understand that somebody even younger than you that's probably also going to be signing artists and promoting music and on the radio and all that kind of stuff. So understand, like, I mean, that's one of the coolest things I think that I've been able to experience is, I just turned 42 and I've been doing this for 25 years. And there's legitimately people that I met 20 to 25 years ago that are now like A&Rs, working at record labels, working at magazines, all that kind of stuff. They're still here. I'm still here. We all started just as a bunch of kids trying to figure this out. And we all are now doing this together. And it's really, really cool to see that, like, the community you surround yourself with will be the community that grows with you. And just be kind to everybody, support each other when you can, and just keep your eyes open. Really, really focus and observe what's happening, because all of the examples are in front of you and you can see when somebody takes a shot and it doesn't land. Learn from that, research it. Yeah, and just go watch a bunch of cool music documentaries, because I think it really does enlighten you. Even if you've never even heard of the artist, I think it's a really, really cool thing.
Yeah, and I think it inspires you too. That really gets you fired up to do
Absolutely.
Something. Yeah. Paul, what's the best way to get a hold of you? Is it through the website? Is it through socials? What's the best way that people can get a hold of you?
Yeah, so obviously on the Tandem website, which is like tandemmgmt.co. Also, you can learn about the roster, see my colleagues. My email address is linked off of that. I'm mainly just on like Instagram, Paul Koehler X on there. But email is very part of the everyday.
Wonderful. Paul, we want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this and
thank you.
And having this conversation with us. We really, really appreciate it and are very grateful to you.
No, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. So glad that we had this conversation with Paul.
Yeah.
I had been very excited when he agreed to do this because he is such a unique, how do I put this? I guess a unique element within the music business. There are not many managers who are also, the musicians.
Exactly. It's extremely, extremely rare.
Extremely rare. I mean, I used to think if you produce the records of the artists that you manage, that was rare. And only Bill Ham and I think Peter Asher were the only two people I can ever remember who did that for James Taylor and Linda Ronstadt, and Bill did it for ZZ Top. It's a very rare combination. And, one of the things that, and you obviously just heard the conversation. One of the things that I thought was so interesting about this is, and it goes to the heart of something, again, that often can be overlooked, but is very important today, is when he spoke about the value of a record label in each artist's career. It is not the same. The value of a label is not the same for every single artist. And how he talked about, where you are in your career. What are your needs in terms of your artist development, where you're at now? Versus, if you're further along, maybe you don't need a label. Maybe there isn't the kind of amplification that can be done at that station of the career that could be done in an earlier part of the career.
Right.
And I think this is really important for artists, especially young artists that are starting out, to realize, a lot of that early, shall we say, smaller or beginning amplification needs to come from you, and then you're hopefully going to get a label to be able to take that on. But it's an important distinction.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have the same impact for every single kind of artist or every single kind of music.
Also, Rich, one of the other areas, which this one was near and dear to my heart because there's a flip side to these coins, but on balancing artist and business roles. And, when he said, whenever you take on more of a business role, you kind of sacrifice being the artist. And I know that, intuitively. So now everything's your problem, which is true. You live by the sword and you die by the sword. I believe I even asked him during the conversation, has that built any friction for you? Because, you make a bad decision, you're in the band. It's kind of like it's all falling on you. So there's that part of it. Everything is tailored to the group, not to yourself. So the ability to kind of have sort of wants and needs as the artist, you kind of have to put that aside and you have to step up a little bit. But for him, it's I felt it was a natural progression, and he's always felt really motivated and always wanted to work really hard. And, and he thinks that being a part of the artistic creative side, that he just wanted to push that. And I admire him because it's somebody that's speaking to the choir with me, because I've been doing this for years, where I have managed a lot of the projects that I've been in, or managed outside projects as well too. But it is a unique situation to be in, because it's a real fine balance that you're dancing there, because when problems happening, it's like I said, you live by the sword and you die by that sword.
Absolutely. And I think one of the other factors that goes along with that, Eric, is, that he spoke about, toward the end, he spoke about the fact that this is a way of life. This is a life. It's not a, project that you just achieve everything within a year or two. It's a full form of life. And that, you have to be aware of that. You have to be supportive of that whole journey. It's most important for artists to get that, if this is to be your career. And most artists want a career. And I think it's very important that they understand that.
Hey, Insiders, thanks so much for tuning into this episode. We really appreciate it. To get show notes, links, and everything that was mentioned during this interview, head on over to our official website at MUBUTV.com/podcast/show notes. If you're enjoying the content and what we're doing here on the show, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts from. And don't forget to rate and review our show at iTunes. 5-star reviews are always welcome and help to ensure that our podcast stands out on the top-rated and new and noteworthy charts on iTunes and our space. You can also find us at social media at Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter X, all ending with the handle MUBUTV, which is spelled MUBUTV. Don't forget to catch our flagship show, the MUBUTV Music Business Insider video series, airing every week on YouTube at youtube.com/MUBUTV. This show was produced and created by Rich Ezra and Eric Knight. Theme music by Disciples of Babylon, and be sure to tune in next week for another episode of the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast.